we're going to be making our final 2024 United States Senate prediction. We're going to be looking at the 34 races that are up this cycle and determining who will control the United States Senate. For the last few years, it's been the Democrats. They fought off a Republican wave in 2022, even flipping Pat Toomey's former seat with John Fetterman winning there. Will Republicans be able to take back the Senate? Starting off with the safe Democrat states, which are states that will have a Democratic victory of over 10 points. We have the state of Washington, California, New Mexico, Virginia, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, and also Maine. The state of Minnesota will be safe by the barest of margins, thinking 11 or 12% victory there. This leaves the Democrats off with 40 seats. Now, for the Republican side, Republicans will safely win North Dakota, Nebraska's special election, Wyoming, Utah, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, Indiana, West Virginia, which is a flip. The reason that seat will flip is Joe Manchin is retiring from the Senate, meaning that no Democrat can win there. The Republican is going to win by a massive 40% plus margin. So now on to the likely Democrat states. By the way, that leaves Republicans off with 47 Senate seats. The likely, New York is meant to be safe. So now on to the likely Democratic state, and so is Hawaii. That's my bad. That's 42. That leaves them off with. Everything else is right. So we go with 11 states, which will be within 10%. Starting off in the far west coast, we have the state of Nevada, which will go to Jackie Rosen by a lean to likely margin, probably more in the 4.5% range. Jackie Rosen is the favorite due to polling. She has a huge lead over Sam Brown in the aggregate by about 6% now. She even led the Atlas Intel poll, which had Trump up massively. She led Emerson poll, which has a brilliant record in the state. And John Ralston has been pretty confident on her chances. Even Trafalgar has her up by 2. So it's pretty evident that she is going to win that state. I think it'll be by about 4.5%. In Arizona, Kari Lake is making some gains in the state. It is a complicated state in 2024 because it is the only state in the country, or at least of the 7 swing states at the presidential level, that have their most important issue as not the economy, but instead it is the border. Immigration is the critical issue in Arizona. But however, Kari Lake has not done a great job at tying herself to winning the issue of immigration, but instead has talked about the failures of democracy in Arizona. Abortion is on the ballot as well, and Kari Lake is very conservative on abortion. However, as a woman, she probably comes across as more as a stronger candidate than, say, a white other man would do. But, however, Ruben Gallego has a 5% lead in the aggregate. He spent and raised 3 times more what Kari Lake has, and the Arizona Republicans are really struggling. Kari Lake lost in 2022 by 0.3% against Katie Hobbs. And it's becoming very clear that Ruben Gallego is going to win. According to Fight for 38, he has an 85% chance of victory, compared to in 2022, where she had a 67% chance of victory. This is why I'm putting Arizona in the likely Democratic category, meaning that Ruben Gallego is likely to win by 5 or 6%. Moving to Montana, which is our second flip of the night, John Tester will lose his Senate seat, losing it by a lean margin to Tim Sheehy. He will win the seat, Tim Sheehy, by 4.5%. There are several reasons for this, and it comes down to the fact that John Tester is going to be crushed by Donald Trump's influence down the ballot. He hasn't ran in the presidential year since Romney and Obama election, and obviously that was a very different time in America. Now Montana is a much safer Republican state, and Donald Trump is going to win by a 19 or 20% margin. That's a very difficult margin to overcome. This is why Tim Shea, even though John Tester is probably in theory more popular, is going to win that seat by 4.5%. He's leading every poll, and according to 538, he has a much bigger chance of winning than he did 3 months ago. In Nebraska's very interesting election, uh, Fisher will win by 3 or 4%. Now, Nebraska has a very interesting election. It is not between a Republican and a Democrat, it is between a Republican and a non caucusing independent. Now, this non caucusing independent is Dan Osborne. Who is Dan Osborne? Well, he's a very complicated figure because he's an industrial mechanic, he's a veteran, he was a part of the Navy, and he is a true blue independent, or the true non blue independent, if you like. Democrats didn't run a candidate for that reason. Now, the race's consensus is leaning Republican, according to Political Insight Elections, Larry Sabato, and also Real Clear Politics. And I agree with that classification. I think that race will be won by 3 or 4%. They have raised and spent very similar amounts of money, and the aggregate has Fisher up by 1 or 2%. This is why I'm thinking 3 or 4%. What is saving Deb Fisher is in fact Donald Trump being on top of the ticket, and he will win the state by a huge margin. In the state of Texas, Ted Cruz will hang on by a bigger, albeit not by much, smaller margin, a bigger margin than he did in 2018. He is, I think, not the most popular candidate that Republicans could have run, and would probably appreciate a move to the Supreme Court because in 2030, I don't know if he's going to get that lucky. But the race consensus is leaning Republican. Colin Alert has run a good campaign and has raised $80 million. He's also spent more than Ted Cruz, who spent 76. Currently, Ted Cruz has a 3.5% lead in the aggregate, which means that he is the favourite there, and 538 agrees with this. I believe that even though Houston suburbs will trend Democratic, the Hispanic trends to the Republican Party will offset the Colin Alert gains in the white suburban areas, and Ted Cruz will win that seat, giving Republicans 50 seats in the United States Senate, meaning that if Donald Trump is elected, J.D. Vance would get the casting tide vote. Moving to the state of Florida, Rick Scott will win that seat. Republicans have held that one for a while now, and it's becoming very evident that despite a respectable campaign from Debbie Powell, Republicans are going to win. It is a likely Republican race according to the consensus. And the aggregate has it as a 5% lead for Rick Scott. I believe he'll win it by closer to 6 or 7 points, simply because of the way Florida is now. Polls still underestimate Republicans there, as they did in 2022 with both Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis. And I think Donald Trump's going to win by closer to 10% than 5%. And I think Rick Scott's race will be similar to Trump's. Now that leaves us, and that gives Republicans a Senate majority for the first time since 2019, or 2021, sorry. Now, to the 4 Rust Belt states and Maryland. Starting off with Maryland, it's a race between former governor, very popular governor, Larry Hogan, and a county chief or something along those lines. It's going to be a closer race than some believe. Larry Hogan is down in the aggregate by about 10 or 9 or 10%, and the consensus rating is that it is a solid Democrat race. However, I'm giving this the likely Democratic category because I think it'll be a 7 or 8% margin. Larry Hogan performed well in the debates, and he's done well to not tie himself to Trump. Also, Brooks has failed to tie Larry Hogan to the former president, and even though that also Brooks has spent 3 times what Larry Hogan has, I think Larry Hogan has been more effective with that money. And even though the aggregate is at 10.5%, I'm predicting a 7 or 8% margin in the state. Now, the Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. These were very competitive races in the 2022 Senate elections, with John Fetterman winning in a surprise victory by a massive 4.9%, a margin that nobody expected. In Ohio, J.D. Vance, the new vice president nominee, won that state, and Ron Johnson won by a shockingly small margin, for just under 1%. Starting off in Ohio, Bernie Moreno will win that seat by 1 or 2%. He has run a poor campaign, and Sherrod Brown has done a solid job at tying himself as a moderate Democrat that is willing to work with Trump on trade. However, we know that this isn't really the truth. Tim Sheehy, Sherrod Brown is actually one of the most liberal Democrats in the Senate, and Bernie Moreno has gotten that idea out. He's gotten that concept out, and he's tied him somewhat effectively to Biden, Sanders, and Harris. Uh, Even though the current aggregate has Sherrod Brown winning the state by 2%, I believe that it is clear that Bernie Moreno is going to outperform that due to the fact that it always happens in Ohio. But this is going to be a close race. There is no doubt about that. Every single aggregate has it within 1.5%, and every single major prediction figure has it as a toss up. That very rarely happens, and 538 says this is basically the dead heat of dead heat. I believe that Bernie Moreno will win by 2 or 3%, however, simply because Donald Trump is going to win by 11, almost increasingly likely by more than 10%, when putting it into the safe Republican category. Bernie Moreno was outspent in the 2022 primary, but still won by 18%, massively outperforming the polls, giving us the sign that he could do the same again. Fundraising has been a disaster for Bernie Moreno, however, in this cycle. He's been outspent 4 times because Democrats know that they cannot lose this seat. There are polls that have Bernie Moreno up and polls that have Sherrod Brown up, and by very similar margins. I believe that this race will be decided by 2 or 3%, and Bernie Moreno will win. In the state of Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick will fall short to Bob Casey by 3 or 4%. McCormick is doing a good job at tying Casey. He did very well in the debate, in my opinion, but it's pretty evident that Bob Casey is just too much of a significant figure in the state. His family name is historical. His father was a senator for decades, a very conservative senator. But, however, Casey is going to win that seat. Uh, and I think it's becoming pretty clear that that's the case. Uh, Simply, Dave McCormick has run a successful campaign, but he's obviously going to. Trump's going to outrun him by 3 or 4%. And if Trump wins the state by percent, I think it's clear that McCormick's going to lose by about 2 or 3. So now we move to the final two, Wisconsin and Michigan, the Blue Wolf states. As of now, I believe that the race will be decided by 5 or 6% in Michigan. The current aggregate has Stockton up by 3.5, and polls do traditionally underestimate Republicans there. But I just feel like Mike Rogers has not ran as successful as a campaign as those polls suggest, and I believe that Elise Slotkin is a very popular candidate. I think she's very well liked. I think she came across as very, very well liked in that debate, and 538 would agree with me there as well, having it as a likely Democrat race, even giving her the 6% lead, a 4% lead in the aggregate. But however, in the Senate race, in their forecast, she has only got Rogers only has a 23% chance of winning and is forecasted to lose by 4.9%. So moving on to the final state between Eric Hovde and Tammy Baldwin. Eric Hovde has run a very, very good campaign in the last 6 weeks. He's absolutely crushing Tammy Baldwin, and the polls are starting to come in. If any of those 3 Rust Belt states are going to flip, it is going to be Wisconsin. It is absolutely close. And I believe that Eric Hovde could outperform Donald Trump in the WOW counties, meaning that he is a chance. Atlas Intel had the race tied, Marist College as well, and polls very often underestimate Republicans massively on Wisconsin. They're never that accurate, which is why I don't think polling should be the factor that we take in the most. If we look at the expert ratings, they have Wisconsin as a lean or likely Democrat race. However, looking at Donald Trump's margins in the state, that he's going, I believe that he will get and win by 1 or 2%. I think Everett Holiday will run very near behind him. I think that it is likely that Tammy Bolden wins the state by less than 0.3%, talking a couple thousand votes, 3,000, 4,000, a 0.23% margin in the state, leaving Republicans with 52 seats in the Senate, flipping Montana, West Virginia, and also the state of Ohio, meaning three flips from 49 to 52, giving Republicans a Senate majority. And if they can keep the House, flip the presidency, they will have a Republican trifecta for the first time in 5 years, meaning Donald Trump will be able to pass his legislative agenda. So thank you for watching, guys. This is my final 2024 Senate prediction. Republicans will win 52 Senate seats. And Democrats will win 48. Thank you for watching, and see you guys in my next video, which will be my 2024 presidential prediction. Thanks for watching, and see you later.